Hello and welcome to this recording of the 2020 Partners Ask the Experts industry webinar for sport and exercise science. This session was hosted by our careers consultant for the subject area, Karen Pearson, and she was joined by our guests, Newcastle University alumni and current PhD student Oliver Bell, Health and Wellbeing Manager at Newcastle United Foundation, and Geoff Wade, Aquatics Officer at Gateshead Council. Both of our guests will be delivering short talks to tell you a little bit more about themselves, their time at university and their current careers, before Karen leads them in a Q&A with questions that have been previously submitted by some of our partner students. Without any further ado, we're going to hand over to Geoff to tell us a little bit more about himself and his career to date.
Hi everyone, I'm Geoff Wade and I've been working in the leisure industry for about, just under 20 years now. And I started off as a lifeguard and a swimming teacher. And I've gone through my career and worked in a number of different roles across the industry and sort of regional management roles. And I'm currently working for Gateshead Council, running the 5 swimming pools in Gateshead and delivering the Aquatics programme, which is all the swimming lessons, the public swimming, basically anything to do with what goes on in the water, in the swimming pools, which obviously are closed at the moment, which so we've got that problem to deal with when we're allowed to reopen, which hopefully we're going to get an announcement on that this week from the government. But that's the main part of my job is dealing with that. What I found from university, I didn't actually do sports science as a degree. My degree was actually in communications, but having looked at the sports science degree and all the modules that would be covered in it, there is a lot of crossover in terms of what you do and what you need to be a successful person in any kind of business. And what I found relating my career back to my degree is that a lot of the things that have happened and that I've done, I've referred back to that learning from university. So it was a really important sort of guiding post through my career. Might be things that you don't think you would ever use at the time that you do them, but when you actually think back, when you're forging through your career, you do actually use that knowledge and experience that you've gained at university. In terms of what I do at the moment, so I'm currently working in Gateshead. We've got about 3,500 children and adults who access our Learn to Swim programme. We also teach another 2,000 pupils a week through school swimming, and also the general swimming and public health type of areas. So the sports science again comes into that area. So we're in the public health department of the council, so a lot of the things that we do as the provider of the swimming and the leisure activities in the borough is that we have to make sure it's meeting those public health agendas. So the sports science aspect does come in there. As a swimming teacher, which is what I sort of first trained up as, the sports science elements to a sort of lower level perhaps than the degree level, but those sports science elements do come into play, learning about the anatomy and physiology in order to teach swimming effectively. Over my career, I've also been involved in developing facilities. So although I work for Gateshead now, I have moved across the country and worked for various different operators. The way that the leisure industry works is that, generally speaking, local authorities own the facilities and the leisure centres in the area, and they will either run them in-house, which is the case for Gateshead, or they will put them out to another company to run them. So there are various national operators and local trusts that run the facilities. So there are lots of opportunities. I've worked for 3 of the biggest national operators as well as 2 or 3 local authorities over the past 20 years. So I've got quite a broad experience. And I think one of the most interesting things that I've done is using sort of the population data and all the health data to justify the provision of new facilities. I've been involved in the opening of 3 brand new leisure centres, so putting in place the programmes, deciding exactly what goes into the buildings, what the facility mix is, as we call it, how big the pool should be, what the program is that will go into those pools. And I've also been involved in the refurbishment and consultation processes for the redevelopment of other facilities. My biggest achievement, I think, when I was working in Dagenham in London, was being able to justify and get the funding for a 50-metre pool to be built at the leisure centre I was working at, because it was basically built up to be the largest swim school in the UK. And there was that pent-up demand that needed the extra pool space, and that's my biggest achievement over the past 5 years or so, doing that. I think I'll leave it there for the moment. If there's any questions now or later, I'll stay to answer them.
Okay, thanks very much, Geoff. That's really useful. Some really good insights there. I have to say I'm very impressed with that big pool in Dagenham. That sounds like a really interesting project. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it certainly was, and it's one of those things that I knew from. It was my initial concept, and actually putting all the business plans together, and then getting the funding and liaising with the company to build it. And that is a really satisfying thing, to have a legacy like that.
Yeah.
You can say if that building wouldn't exist were it not for me.
That's very rewarding, isn't it? Yeah, think of all the people who are going to learn to swim. Yeah, that's great. Okay, should we pass on to Oliver now and see if you want to take your 10 minutes now, Ollie, and then we'll have some questions after that. Okay.
Absolutely, not a problem. Yes, thank you very much for having me. I suppose I'll start from the top, and kind of before this meeting I was prepping what sort of things I'd talk about, and when I was thinking about that, I started to put some dates next to some of the things, well, my kind of journey through where I suppose the viewers of this video may have come from, and it's quite shocking to know that it was about 10 years ago I was sat in that position when I was at college and deciding what sort of path I want to go down, which is obviously such a huge daunting decision to make at such a young age, really, at 17 years old. What do you want to do with your life? So at college I did A-levels. I did PE, biology, maths and psychology. I was interested in sports science and PE specifically. Had a huge interest throughout my GCSEs. I'm stumbling over a little bit because I'm struggling to remember what I was interested in 10 years ago, but I think it was something like that. So I did my A-levels in those subject areas. Applied for Northumbria University to do physiotherapy because I wanted to work with people and work in the kind of rehabilitation side of health. I didn't get the right UCAS points, which they were at the time. I'm not sure if they still are, but they are excellent currently, so I presume you still have UCAS points. So I didn't get enough UCAS points to get onto the physiotherapy degree, and got my second choice, which was sport, exercise and nutrition at Northumbria. I knew that I wanted to go to Northumbria University, and I knew I wanted to do physiotherapy, and I remember I clicked on the sport, exercise, nutrition link at the bottom of the page on the website portal, because other people had also viewed that. So I clicked on that page and thought that one can be my second choice as well. So I suppose there wasn't a huge amount of thought process that went into that decision. I just kind of stumbled into it. So I moved up to Newcastle in 2011, started my degree at Northumbria University doing sport, exercise and nutrition. Soon became aware that I'd kind of dodged a bullet, in that physiotherapy possibly wasn't the route that I really wanted to go down, and starting learning about all the different disciplines that sit within sport, exercise, science, and I had the nutrition element to that as well. It was really quite fascinating. I went through my degree and did my dissertation. So when you're in your final year of your degree, you get a dissertation, which is kind of like a project which you go out and you it's like a science experiment, a really in-depth science experiment. So you create a hypothesis. What is it that I want to find out? And then you have some sort of methodology. How am I going to try and find out this hypothesis? And then you've got data and results that go alongside of that. And hopefully at some point you come to a conclusion about what your data suggests or what it demonstrates and how that might answer your hypothesis. So in my final year at university, during my dissertation, I focused on the effects of tart cherry juice, Montmorency tart cherry juice, on exercise-induced muscle damage, which is really quite complicated, for basically saying, if I was to feed somebody, it's basically a shot of cherry juice, or it was at the time, a shot of cherry juice, does that affect your delayed onset of muscle soreness? So if you're doing PE at the moment, and if you're doing maybe a BTEC in sport exercise science, then you may have come across delayed onset of muscle soreness before. It's basically this pain that you get in the following days following exercise. So if anyone's ever been to the gym or been for a run or done any kind of really quite physical intensive work, your muscles become really sore afterwards, and that might prevent you from performing at the best. And in subsequent days after that exercise, you probably aren't going to perform as well as what you could have done. So how can we prevent that from happening? How can we prevent the pain from happening and dampen the effects of that? So I basically took a group of people, group of my peers, group of my friends, made them, what was it at the time, we were doing sprints. So they had to do some sprints and then slow down really quickly, because the slowing down really quickly created the damage within the muscles. And then we fed them some Montmorency cherry juice for a couple of days, and we tested to see whether or not that made a difference to the pain, to the muscle strength, and a couple of other different measures as well. So that was kind of my undergraduate degree. As a result of that, I developed quite a good relationship with my supervisor at the time, Emma Stevenson, Dr. Emma Stevenson, who she was at the time. And Emma enrolled me, or suggested that I went on and do a master's in looking at the effects of beetroot juice. So we've gone from cherry juice to beetroot juice, and we're looking at now the effects of how beetroot juice can affect your blood flowing around your body, so your blood pressure, your exercise tolerance, and the brain blood flow as well. So we had like a little machine that you could stick on your temporal lobe there, and it would measure the speed of which the blood going through an artery in the middle of your brain. And we were looking to see whether or not the beetroot juice made that blood either flow quicker or flow slower, and that could in turn tell us whether or not there might be a risk of things like strokes in the brain. And then we looked at the beetroot juice and the effects of the blood pressure, and there's loads of evidence out there which suggests beetroot juice lowers people's blood pressure, which obviously has huge health benefits, not just sports science benefits, but health benefits to it too. So that was my master's work, and I found that really quite fascinating. So that was kind of all in the area of, they call it functional foods, which are like your beetroots, your cherries, your spinach, all those other kinds of foods that can really make a difference to your body. But at the same time of doing my master's, I was on the look for a job. I was wanting to go into work, and there was a post that came up at Newcastle United Foundation. I've never heard of Newcastle United Foundation, didn't really know what they did loads of research online, as you do when you're applying to a job, and stumbled across found out that the foundation is the charity that works alongside of the football club. They go into the community and do all the kind of charitable responsibilities of the football club. So the foundation to date now works with over 60,000 people throughout the Northeast, Northumberland, Newcastle, North Tyneside and Gateshead. We work with people as young as 3 or 4, doing the kind of soccer school stuff, through to primary school age children, and that's where I started. So for the first 3 years of my career at the foundation, I was working in primary schools and basically trying to apply some of the knowledge that I'd gained from my degree working with kids and teaching kids how to eat a healthier diet and how to live a healthier life. And then through to the foundation also works with people who are not in education or employment. So younger people who might be struggling to get a job, they try and get them closer to the job market. And then all the way through to kind of older aged health. And that's where my area comes in now. So as I mentioned, I spent the first 3 years at the foundation working with kids in schools, teaching them all about the things like the Eat Well guide and really basic sort of nutrition. And I came to the operations manager at the time, who's now the head of the foundation, and said to him, this isn't what I want to do. I've spent a lot of money and a lot of time understanding what keeps people physically healthy, and I'm now teaching kids to eat apples. And I said that, and that's since come back to bite me quite a few times. He always repeats that at meetings, or you just wanted to teach kids to eat apples. And I said, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to do something a little bit more challenging. And he basically said, well, go out there and find something that you want to do. And I was given this kind of huge amount of freedom to go and explore. And at the time, I got back in touch with my old supervisor from my master's and undergraduate degree, Emma Stevenson, who is now the professor of sports science at Newcastle University. And Emma started discussing what we do at the foundation, the amount of people that we work with, became really impressed that we've got this huge reach within the community. We can go out into the community and work with thousands and thousands of people purely because people like me dressed in clothes like this walk around the Northeast, and you can start conversations with people and deliver certain programs to those people purely because of the love and the passion of Newcastle and Newcastle United in the Northeast. So Emma suggested that I did some form of PhD and looked at potentially using that power and that reach within the community to engage groups of people and do some form of PhD. And that kind of is what started the ball rolling with where I am now, alongside securing some funding from the Premier League. So a lot of the foundation's funding comes from places like the Premier League. Premier League's a big giant. They get loads of money from TV rights. That money sort of trickles down the tree and it comes down to places like where I am now, the foundation. And we use that money to go out and do good stuff in the community. We received some money from the Premier League, which allowed us to begin a health and wellbeing department. And that's what I am overlooking now. So I'm the health and wellbeing manager at Newcastle United. That's my full-time job. I'm doing maternity cover. So I finish that contract in November, and then I'll go back into my usual day-to-day job, which is, it's my day-to-day job, but it's also my PhD. It's kind of half and half. I'm doing a part-time PhD, which is all about designing this 12-week men's health intervention to try and change men's health behaviours and look at mental, physical and social health. So throughout my academic career, I very much focused on sports science and focused on the physical aspects of health. And I kind of stumbled into the mental health side of it as well. And 2 years ago or so, I realised that, hang on a minute, I've spent years and years understand what keeps myself physically as fit as I possibly can, and how I can help others to do the same. But what are the things that I do to keep myself as mentally fit as possible? And I realised that there were possibly things that I wasn't doing, and I was potentially neglecting my mental health quite a bit. And that became really quite fascinating. So this PhD is basically the product of all of that learning. It is trying to now apply the physical aspect of health, the mental aspect of health, and ultimately, if you put a group of people in a room and talk about those things, you impact the social aspects of health as well. So that's kind of where I am now. That's what I've been doing over the past 9 or 10 years now. I suppose lessons that I've learned, I know we're going to come back to it at the end, Karen, so I will remember one really important lesson for the end, but just while I've got people's attention, I suppose for me, sticking your head above the parapet, and I say that to a lot of our work experience people who come through the foundation. We've got 2 universities within the city that offer sports science degrees. That churns out hundreds of kids or hundreds of people every year who've got degrees in sport exercise science or sport exercise coaching or some form of sport exercise discipline. What makes you different from everybody else? So if I've got a CV, if I've got a stack of CVs of people who want to apply to my department and work underneath me in the health and wellbeing team, what makes you different to other people? And a lot of the time it's volunteering, and a lot of the time it's going out there and doing things within the community and getting experience and speaking to people. And I think that can go a long way, in my opinion. I don't know if Geoff kind of has similar thoughts like that. I saw you giving some big nods, so I'm happy that I've kind of might have hit something there. But for me, that's what stands out are people who come and knock on my door and go, what can I do within the foundation? How can I volunteer? How can I work alongside you and learn from you and try and take that into their own career? So they're the people who stand out of the hundreds of people who have sport exercise science degrees.
I would definitely agree with that, Ollie. And I think that also, as well as making you more employable, it also helps you through your studies. If you have those volunteering opportunities and you can actually apply what you're learning to something real. It's very difficult to be abstract when you're in a learning environment and when you have, you're asked to do a project, but you haven't got something real to work against. So when you're in those sort of volunteering roles, when you've got some other activities that you're doing that you can relate back to your learning, that makes it so much easier to get through your degree.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. And I'd just take, I suppose, strength and conditioning as an example there, which is a discipline within sport exercise science. There's loads of sort of qualifications and badges that you can get to go alongside your strength and conditioning degree, which all kind of teach you what are the biomechanics and what is the physiology to try and elicit the biggest responses from an individual possible. But if you don't know how to speak to that individual, and if you don't know how to translate what you've learned to a layman, to a person who's not got much knowledge around sports science or strength and conditioning at all, then all that you've learned isn't necessarily useful, because we need to be able to explain what we've learned to people. Otherwise, what's the point in you learning it in the first place? I think that would be my opinion, but you've got me on a bit of a tangent on a bit
No. Actually, it's quite nice to hear what you both said there, because that was one of the next questions I was coming to, and the question was, how important is relevant work experience when trying to get a graduate job? And I think what you both said about taking a lot of advantage of the things that are available at university is really, really important there. And it's quite interesting, because I mean, I imagine that you do some recruitment, Geoff. Have you done recruitment as part of your roles?
Yes, I mean, it's generally swimming teachers, so it's a vocational qualification as opposed to a sort of degree level qualification. But what we do find is that as an adjunct to university, having a swimming teacher or a lifeguard qualification is the perfect kind of role that you can do while you're at university to support your studies. So we do get a lot of students who apply as swimming teachers and lifeguards as well. So it's, they're interrelated, but you can also earn while you learn.
Yeah. I think it's also quite interesting what you were saying as well, Ollie, is that in terms of the experiences you have at university, you can be part of university sports teams, you can be, swimming instructors, the kind of thing that they're just talking about there. But I guess, I think if I've read you rightly in what you were saying, it's also thinking about how you differentiate yourself. And you might get lots of applicants for a job, for example, that will have a lot of sports experience. And yes, I mean, sports is a really important thing in terms of developing all-round skills, not just the physical skills and required to do the sport, but also the kind of teamwork and the softer skills. But I just wonder if maybe if some of the students listening to this, if they're going to come and join us at the university, as well as doing their sport, it seems from what you're saying as if you value a broader range of experiences that kind of maybe take you outside of sport, but give you some insight, for example, into businesses or just how to actually talk to people who perhaps aren't really, you're trying to convert people into a particular message. I mean, imagine you had to use quite a lot of persuasive skills, Geoff, when you were doing the project that you described to us.
But definitely having those sort of other skills that if you're doing a specific degree might not be part of the degree in itself, but actually the sort of core functional skills, the better your use of Excel and your ability to manipulate data. If you can understand that, you can sort of look at the data and see things from the data. Whereas if you don't understand what to take from data, you might not actually see the big picture. So I think that's my sort of key thing through there. A lot of people, if they were looking at what I was doing in Dagenham, basically, I'll not go into it in too much detail, but we had a brand new leisure centre opened, and generally speaking, leisure centres have 1,000, 1,500 pupils in a swimming lesson programme. I started off when the new centre opened, it replaced the old centre, which had about 1,200. Within the first year, it got 3,000, which I thought exceeded my expectations prior to getting the job. But then with the 5 years that I was there, we grew it to nearly 6,000 pupils, which basically had never been seen anywhere before. Now, if somebody else had just taken the usual view and said, well, it's just not possible to do that many, then they would have already stuck at 3,000 or 1,500. But if you look at the data and you look at a way of actually implementing something different, then you can achieve much bigger change overall. Yeah. So definitely, it's that all-encompassing remits, and not just having a narrow field of view, and not just silo working, doing your own specific thing, looking at that big picture.
And looking to change things as well. And I can also see from listening to both of you speak the importance of data as a background, and not just obviously as a basis for research, but obviously the basis for for making change as well. And there's lots of different ways you can work on your data skills, but they certainly seem to be an important part of the landscape.
Absolutely.
I think they are in sports science. I think they are in health. I think health policies are driven by data. We've just had 4 months of the government putting spreadsheets on TV, Like that's kind of data. That's what drives a lot of changes within society as a whole. Is how is the community reacting? How are they behaving, and what sort of things can we do to try and manipulate that and change that and improve that for the better? And it's not necessarily that you have to be a data scientist, and it's not necessarily that you have to be a statistician, although having a good stats knowledge during a sports science degree is probably important, and definitely something that you should try and find some interest in, because if you can find interest in it, you'll understand it and you'll be better at it. But I think it's I won't be daunted by that. I won't be sat there thinking, well, I'm not very good at maths, I'm not very good at stats. Then you can learn how to do it, and you can learn how to be the basic stuff, or if you've got those kind of interpersonal skills, which I think is what we've alluded to a few times there, is that sports science, thankfully, is a discipline which turns its hand quite nicely at quite sociable people. We're very good at speaking to people who stem from sport backgrounds. Now you might be able to turn that skill at becoming friends with a data statistician, or somebody who does know the way around the data. I think that could be really quite important, is kind of working across teams, especially in what we do. It's really important for me to work with our finance team and with the people who look after the data and the spreadsheets and stuff like that. It's really important that I create a good relationship with them, so that we can, again, translate what we're learning, tell the layman, tell the person who doesn't quite understand what data means, or what the really intricate details of sports science mean. We need to be able to talk to people and explain that to your average Joe.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, just to follow on that point you've just made, really, it's about communication skills. And I think lots of people, I would perhaps include myself, when they start university, I was quite shy. I wasn't very confident in speaking to people. I used to go quite red every time I had to say something, quite often. But I think it's true to say lots of people develop much better communication skills, more confident communication skills with people through some of the activities that they get involved in on their course and at university, which would in turn help them in their future plans.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's kind of what I did throughout university. Unfortunately, and I wish I'd got involved with a lot more of the societies at university, because you develop some really, really strong relationships there. But I did very much take part in, I got jobs in public facing roles and working within the hospitality industry and things like that, where you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. I think that can help you develop confidence and potentially help you stop going red when you're talking to people.
Yes.
It does happen. It's a common thing. It's not something to shy away from. I think learning, or I don't know, Karen, you might be able to say, but hopefully it gets better as you practice it. As you practice speaking to people, you can avoid those feelings.
Yes. It's just an initial thing, and you can usually work through it. I don't go red anymore. I should think not really.
It worked then. It worked.
Yeah, it worked. It did work. Yeah. I have got another question though for you guys, if you can do another one. I think one of the things that we thought people might ask about are some important factors to consider when applying for jobs in sports and exercise. I don't know if you can sort of give any suggestions or give any sort of insight into what kinds. Obviously, we know about the kinds of roles that you two are in, but if you can give us any insight into any wider roles that people could choose to do with their sports and exercise science qualifications.
So you're wondering what else you can do with the degree? Well, I suppose we'll probably both evidence that your sports science degree doesn't necessarily mean that you work in elite sport, or that if you do work in sport you need a sports science degree. I think it's very, as I said earlier, versatile. It's a degree which you can take and apply to different areas. There's a whole range of different degrees or jobs that you can get from out there when you come out of university. I think it would probably be important to add something to your undergraduate degree. So if possible, and if you've got the opportunity throughout your degree, can you do any kind of coaching badges? Can you do your swimming badges? Can you do your football coaching badges? Can you do any of the strength and conditioning badges, which I mentioned earlier, and all of these top-ups? And the more of those courses you do, and the more, I suppose, conferences that you attend that are related to different disciplines. So take, for example, the Sport Exercise Nutrition Conference, which occurs at Newcastle University every year. That's a great place for people to, experts especially, to meet up and share their findings and discuss what's hot in the field at the moment. But it's also a great place to network, and that might be where you'd be able to find out what's out there for you as a student or somebody who's doing a sport exercise degree, I think, in my opinion. But there's loads of jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think it's for all the fact that it could be seen as quite a specialist degree. I don't think specialist degrees necessarily put you down a specialist route. You could go into something completely different. It shows that you've actually gone through that process, and you help, and you can learn, and you can sort of meet, even if it's just as simple as meeting deadlines and handling work. That just gives you that employability side. So even if you chose to do something that wasn't related to your degree, I still think you would be able to pick parts of your degree that would work for pretty much any job. Like I was saying, when I was looking at the module list for the sports and exercise degree, in year 3, I think there's lots about entrepreneurship and how that can be applied. So you could absolutely use those skills in pretty much any field that you wanted to.
Yeah. Thanks both of you. That's really, really helpful. I think we know for sure as well that about 40 to 50% of graduate roles are aimed at graduates of any discipline. So if you decided to go into a sports related career, that would be great. But if, like you say, if it wasn't for you, you've developed a very impressive range of transferable skills that you could take into lots of other industries where no prior knowledge of that industry is really needed, because they're happy to train you on the basis of the fact that you've already done a lot of study and proved you can learn independently and in groups at university. So that's true. I think
if it means anything, and I don't know whether or not it would, because it's kind of Ollie's opinion rather than based on data or anything like that. But we've got, as I mentioned earlier, 2 universities, both doing sport exercise science degrees, both having hundreds of people doing these degrees each year. And to my knowledge, I think there's only one sport exercise scientist in the city, and that's Jamie, my colleague from Newcastle United Football Club. There's probably a few more. There's probably one for the Eagles and one for the Falcons and these elite clubs. But that, to me, demonstrates that those people who are coming out of university with those degrees are going into completely different disciplines. They're not necessarily going to be a sport exercise scientist. They can turn the hand at a real large range of roles and positions in the future.
Yes, they can, and a lot of them do a master's degree, a further degree at the end of that in a more kind of focused specialism. A lot go into physiotherapy, for example, or into management roles or sports management type of qualifications or jobs. So there is a lot of things, you're right, that they go on and do. I guess one thing that might be in people's minds, though, when they're thinking about a sports and exercise science degree and thinking about what they might do afterwards, is I guess the impact that the huge changes that we're undergoing as a country and as a world, really, at the moment, as a result of coronavirus, might have on the industry. And I think we hear a lot of positive things about an increased focus, perhaps, on fitness. But at the same time, we know that some elements of the industry are not being allowed to open so soon. And I just feel that some of the students who are interested in doing the course might be interested in your view as how you see the big changes we're going through actually impacting opportunities within the industry.
Shall I know we have
crystal balls. Yeah.
Go on, you can go, Ollie.
I'll go. Yeah. So I suppose from my point of view, looking at it from a charity's perspective, as unfortunate as it potentially is to say, COVID might offer us an opportunity. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be worse off as a result of COVID-19. So there's going to be a lot of people who are unemployed. That means that there might be a lot of funding in the future to try and help people get back into work. There's possibly going to be, I mean, again, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not an expert in COVID-19, but to my understanding, I think those who have been most at risk are those with a higher BMI. and those who suffer with respiratory conditions and things like that as well. So there might be more funding coming up in the future around trying to reduce the BMI and some of the large obesity statistics that we've still got in this country. And I kind of see it as every now and then there's kind of these cycles of where public health's focus lays on. A few years ago, it was very much physical inactivity and obesity. I think within recent years, it's possibly more orientated around mental health and mental illnesses, which is kind of where we've specialised in at Newcastle United Foundation. But from a sports science perspective, what impact that might have on a graduate of a sports science degree, from my opinion, is there'll be a big impact. There will be a focus at some point in the future to try and address these issues. And I think that's probably because traditionally the NHS has very much been built around trying to deal with illnesses and trying to fix ailments when they happen. So they've been very reactive. So they treat symptoms and they try and make sure that people who fall poorly, we try and fix those people who fall poorly. Whereas what's becoming more and more understood is that if we prevent people from getting those illnesses in the first place, it's significantly cheaper for the NHS. So I'm using things like type 2 diabetes and obesity as an example. So these are two ailments or illnesses which could quite easily be prevented through cheaper physical activity or behavior or lifestyle interventions. So if we can prevent somebody from deteriorating their health to the point where they may experience type 2 diabetes in the next 10 years, then that's going to save the NHS a lot of money. So that's kind of where the NHS is looking at it now, I think, is instead of sort of funding all of the treatment for people who are struggling with illnesses like type 2 diabetes, they're going, let's prevent somebody from getting in that situation in the first place.
And that's very much where the leisure sector has been going in the past 5 years or so. As I said, Gateshead Council, the leisure centre sits under the public health department. So it is that direct link to public health remit and, you know, the health of the population. It's not just about, you know, people getting to the gym and getting fit. It's looking at all the different people who are inactive and that whole demographic that we're looking at. So I agree completely. I think that's going to be where it goes. So I think we'll possibly see a slight change in emphasis and, you know, getting more people involved in different ways as that public health agenda increases. And for those with sort of specialist knowledge and qualifications, that's going to be the opportunity there, definitely.
I think so. I think it's an exciting time to be a sports science graduate, because there, unfortunately, because of the horrible situation that we've had over the last few months, the pandemic, as I say, it might lead to opportunities for people who work in health and who work in public health, and people who work in health and public health often have a sports science background to them. So again, just highlighting that sport exercise science degree doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be the sports scientist of Newcastle United. It might mean that you sit within public health at our local public health councils and local authorities, and you might help drive policies, or you might help design programs which can help people access leisure centres more, or help people go to local community venues and access certain physical activity sessions. I think that's where the funding will be in the next few years, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you very much for that. That's really helpful. I think that's hopefully the way that we might see particularly more government investment in public health, and I think it can't avoid the fact that sport will be a very helpful, and nutrition will be very helpful parts of that. Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to come to the last question now, the famous last question that I mentioned right back at the beginning, and just ask each of you in turn, really, that considering your times at university and your own career, what's one bit of advice, what would be your one top tip to share with partner students who are hoping or looking into going into sports and exercise science degrees?
Mine would be always follow your passion. So I feel very lucky in that I don't believe I've ever done a job which I haven't been passionate about and really enjoyed. And I think when you can be passionate about what you're doing as a job, it makes it so much easier. you're not dreading going to work on a Monday morning. You're actually relishing the opportunity to make a difference and do things. So whatever you do within, at university and in the working world, just try to make sure that it's something you enjoy, and linking it back, like I said earlier, if you can link things that you're doing at university to real world problems, to make them less abstract and feel like you're solving a real problem, then do that, because it makes it much more worthwhile for you.
Yeah, it really, it's a big motivator, isn't it? And it's a lovely thing to be able to enjoy a job, and it's important. Yeah, spend a lot of time there, so we may as well enjoy it. Yeah, thank you very much, Geoff. That's really good to hear. How about you, Ollie?
I'd echo that. I think that's absolutely right, Geoff. I think if you enjoy something, it's not work, is it? We just do things that we love and get paid for it, which is quite nice. I think my top tip for any student, regardless of whether or not you're a sports science student or not, would be to use the services that are available at the university as much as possible. There's a kind of a wealth and this huge amount of support for students while they're studying at universities, be that the careers service. Go and use those services as much as possible, because they're invaluable. But I know that I've sat on committees and boards within Newcastle University who've helped design sort of mental health programs and mental health support for students, and a lot of my peers and a lot of my friends within the PhD departments, and they're not aware of the things that are at their fingertips, like things like cloud-based mental health support services like SilverCloud. It's a really expensive product for you to buy outright, but as a student of the university, you get it for free. There are counsellors there at the university who can help people with issues that they may have, but until you're aware that that's at your fingertips, you don't necessarily use them. And I'd strongly encourage people to do so. And I think, again, this is kind of me looking at it from a mental health perspective, but I mentioned earlier about how I spent years and thousands of pounds in trying to understand how to keep myself physically fit, and what was I doing to do the mental equivalent of that. And I used to go to the gym to keep physically fit. What was I doing mentally to keep myself mentally as fit? And I think accessing counsellors and accessing professionals who can help you understand your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions and ultimately your behaviours, that can be just as good as going to the gym for your body. It's sharpening your mind. It's making sure that you're on top of your game and that you're as fit and as healthy as you possibly can be. And all of that is at your fingertips and at your disposal as a student of Newcastle University. So explore, go out and understand what's on your doorstep, understand what's at the campus, go to the Students' Union and use every single possible service you possibly can for free, because it's only for free for 3 years and then it disappears. So yeah, that would be my point of recommendation.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. That's really good, and it's lovely to hear you speak about all the different services that we have at the university. And obviously, we're delighted to be able to help anybody. The university will always try its hardest to help people, to help students enjoy their time at university and to help them succeed. So it's really nice to hear you say that. So that brings us to the end of our session now, and I want to thank you both very, very much indeed for all the time and all the words of wisdom and notes about your experience that you've been able to share with us, that obviously we can then go on and share to students who we hope very much will come and join us at Newcastle University and do our sports and exercise studies degrees.
Thank you for tuning in to this recording of the Partners 2020 Ask the Expert session. We hope you found the discussion and the presentations from our guests useful and insightful. Remember to stay up to date with further advice from alumni and industry professionals. Subscribe to our Newcastle University Career Service YouTube channel, and you can follow us on our social media channels at NCL Careers on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We hope to see you in September. Good luck and take care.